A warm welcome, everyone, to our Singularity U South Africa Summit online for 2021. Now, today we're chatting about moonshot entrepreneurship, micro entrepreneurs, as well as job creation. My name is Elana Afrika Bredenkamp, and it's an honor for me to introduce our guests, Walter Adeo, as well as Nathana Sharma. Nathana, I know so much about you. When I see you, I think blockchain, but I think you can give us an idea of what you're up to at the moment. Take us through it. Faculty of Singularity University and all of the spiel.
Great. So right now I'm really focused on creating a company called Labelbox. And what we do is we actually build tools that support the development of machine learning applications. So when you think about exponential thinking, it's like an S curve on an S curve. So our software allows companies from oil and gas to insurance to manufacturing, all around the world, these companies use our software to create artificial intelligence applications. So a good analogy is GitHub. GitHub is software that is used to edit and manage code. And when you want to build an artificial intelligence application, like a smart alarm system or a camera that can see in a hospital if an elderly patient is falling, what you need to do is you need a system to help you manage, edit, and deploy your training data. And that's what we build at Labelbox.
That's fascinating stuff. Walter Adeo is also with us, Chief Executive and Digital Leader for Cadena Growth Partners. That's not the only thing that you do. I know about your influence and work in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Walter, just give us a short introduction of what you are currently busy with.
So, Ilana, over and above the faculty role at Singularity University, where I focus on the future of work and jobs, which is a very topical conversation, specifically in emerging markets in South Africa. At Cadena, essentially, we're talking about moonshot thinking and entrepreneurial mindsets. So in Cadena, we work with large organizations, large corporates, to essentially help them define their new growth agenda. Or the diversification of their revenue streams. But in doing that, we help them build businesses, conceptualize and build businesses that are resilient and relevant for the digital economy. So it is a form of corporate entrepreneurship. It comes with very similar challenges. The size of the programs are significantly larger, but also because of the corporate entrepreneurship or the entrepreneurship work that we do, we inevitably end up working with amazing entrepreneurs from all over the world, where we either move towards participating in their businesses or partnering with those businesses. And the net effect of that is that we also work with these entrepreneurs then to make sure that the transactions that we undertake are successful. So we help them strengthen their businesses. And the net effect of that is that, over the last while, we've been approached by venture capital funds to be their technical partners to support the investments they make into startups themselves. So the good opportunity, or in the role that I have at the moment, I get to see entrepreneurship from a very large and well-funded corporate perspective, but also work with entrepreneurs and startups going through the challenges that they have to go through to get their businesses to scale and so on.
What would you say is moonshot thinking and going after it? Nathana, if we can start with you, you can perhaps also give us an example of moonshot thinking and being an entrepreneur.
Sure. So I think that the power of moonshot thinking is the power of not knowing what's impossible. So if we look at history, it's just marked in every way by experts saying, this is not possible, this is not possible, that's not possible. And it's actually beginners that create the future. And one example I love on that is flight. We have Wilbur and Orville Wright, who are mechanics out in the Midwest in the United States. They have the first flight. And then 60 some odd years later, we actually have men on the moon. And that's incredible and really mind-blowing if you think about the speed of the first flight that went flew for under a minute to actually getting to the moon. And if you would ask experts, they would always say it's not possible. And I think that today, with the entrepreneurship that I do in building Labelbox, we're constantly confronted with how do we make the impossible possible and think really big. And the bigger you think, the more chance you have to succeed. So I think don't listen to people who say you can't do it.
I couldn't agree more with what's been said. It's, often when I hear the term, or when the term moonshot comes into conversations, it often gets correlated to, the rapid scaling of the business. And I suppose it's it makes sense there as well. But certainly what it means to me is, thinking without constraint. It's not getting caught up into the problems that we all know. It's thinking in a very provocative way about developing that unreasonable value proposition. And I want to emphasize the unreasonable value proposition, because any kind of moonshot construct that first is introduced to a group of individuals is challenged with a tremendous amount of resistance, because it is unreasonable. And then having that resilience to work towards an optimal outcome, and I think it certainly requires that foresight and perspective to think without constraint, and then balancing it with this ability to stay focused on execution and control to make it happen. And then I think there's a number of ingredients that go into making that moonshot possible, or to realizing that unreasonable value proposition.
But what kind of actions can one take to actually get to moonshot thinking? I mean, if someone had to come to you and say, I want to create actual social change and I want people to invest in my big ideas, what actions can people take to actually get to moonshot thinking? Walter, do you want to start with that?
Again, we've got to recognize that what probably constrains us from that kind of thinking is the fixed mindedness that many of us suffer from. I think all of us. And I think it's important for us to recognize the fact that, we are heavily governed by our paradigms. Our opinions are defined by those paradigms. But at the same time, we've also got to recognize that where the magic happens is where we're able to overlay our ambition, which is defined by our paradigm, at the point in which it intersects with reality. So if you think in the world, this exponential world that we're living in, reality is changing constantly. So if reality is changing constantly and our paradigms are rigid and not shifting with the times, there's a bit of a mismatch. And so as leaders of organizations, as entrepreneurs, as problem solvers, we need to recognize that the one thing that we need to focus on is evolving our thinking and our paradigms, which evolves that ambition. And then if ambition that's evolving constantly with reality, I think allows for the start towards generating those unreasonable value propositions. Perhaps a starting point to sort of open up our minds and to think differently about the challenges that we face or the ambitions that we have is to improve our fluency. Our fluency on exponentials, our fluency on the digital economy, our fluency on the various dynamics within which we need to operate. And let's make it practical, So by increasing our fluency, it's important that while we might recognize we need to do things differently, doing them differently is difficult. And so we need to, as business leaders, business owners, whatever the case might be, we need to understand the attributes, the positive and negative attributes of new possibilities around technologies. We need to understand or have a view on the economics of these new technologies. And I think by constantly recognizing, again, going back to the point that we've got to recognize we've got to work on our paradigm and our fixed-mindedness, and constantly working on our fluency to uplift our articulation of the economics, of the possibilities, etc., the kind of leadership that we need to demonstrate in this environment, I think sets us off in the right direction. And then there's other behaviors inside, that we've got to demonstrate either as individuals or as teams. It's recognizing that we've got to balance the paradox of foresight and perspective. In other words, trying to think on the edge of what's possible, but at the same time being able to quantify that vision into something that we can execute against and sort of control to some extent. We can go further to say that perhaps, it's also a recognition that we might not have the capabilities internally. And so we've got to be open-minded towards working in an ecosystem construct where we bring the skills and capabilities and the different thinking into our environment. So ecosystem mindset, again, is very important to unlock those capabilities. Maybe let me hand it back to you.
Well, I would love to
yes.
weigh in if that's okay. So
Please.
the way that I would encourage someone to do moonshot thinking is to say, what is a problem that you have that you want to solve? Yeah. And that problem could be, well, how do I stay connected to my friends? Or how do I get a date? And that could lead you to create Facebook. So what you have to start with is, what's a problem that you have that you want to solve? And then once you know your problem, you can get really creative around solving it. But what you actually need to do is be persistent and don't let people tell you no. And if you combine a problem you have with persistence, you're going to get to a creative solution.
I love that too, because your energy is infectious and so contagious. It's beautiful. I love the problem solving and how you can become functional because of an actual problem that you had. It's something that you also said earlier, Walter, the persistency and making sure that you keep doing in order to become successful in it. Where do you see, and Walter, this is for you, where do you see the future of work and how can entrepreneurship play a part? And I'm thinking specifically in places like South Africa. I live here and I can see what entrepreneurs and what jobs have done to people and for people, not just in this pandemic, but let's say over the last 10 years. What can we do? I mean, where do you see the future of work and how can entrepreneurship play a part in that?
In a number of ways, against a number of dimensions. So first of all, the term entrepreneurship, we tend to, again, associate it specifically in the construct of singularity. We tend to link it to individuals that are leveraging technology to create great and phenomenal businesses or solutions to big problems that we're trying to resolve. And through that, we create new entities, we bring new skills, and we create momentum around the world. But there's another angle to it as well. Not every single entrepreneur has got the skills or the capabilities to go create the next big exponential business or rapidly scaling business. And so certainly an element of entrepreneurship that can be leveraged to create jobs is not necessarily the entrepreneur that invents the new thing or solves the next big problem, but entrepreneurs that know how to leverage digital platforms to create some kind of predictable economic outcome for them. Let's call them micro entrepreneurs. So not necessarily the individual that is inventing the next new solution, but the entrepreneur that knows how to leverage a platform to create some kind of economic relevance. And I think that's where the technology starts playing a significant role in Africa. We've got the challenge of a significant portion of the population that doesn't have access to education. And so these digital platforms or exponential platforms certainly create a new avenue to create jobs. So that's definitely the form of entrepreneurship that I think will go a long way to solve some of the employment problems that we have in the country. And just three broad categories. We've got collaborative consumption, and that's a very well-known model that's leveraged by digital platforms that would not have been possible a number of years ago. We've got other platforms that enable for distributed value chains, where individuals, their asset is their time and a skill that they have that they can monetize. And through things like the distributed ledger technology, we're seeing other ways in which job creation is taking place on the continent. By using digital platforms and exponential technologies as a catalyst, we are seeing businesses that lost their relevance a while back, but through digital influence, there's a rise in connectivity, a rise in transparency, and a rise in trust, which is giving these businesses relevance again. And I do think that is how we're going to turn to technology to solve the job challenges that we have on the continent.
So one thing that I'll say is that there's been, since the rise of the industrial age, folks who are displaced by machines and think that technology is actually creating the problem. And what we've also found is that new jobs are created. So, back in the early 1800s, 70, 80, 90% of people in the US were farmers. And that starts to change with industrialization. There's all kinds of jobs that no one would have ever even imagined. And that's what we're seeing today. So one place where I'm seeing jobs arise in the developing world, and particularly in Africa, is around performing labeling tasks for artificial intelligence. And when you combine that with the fact that our world is becoming increasingly distributed, there's actually a window for people, no matter where they are in the world, to contribute to organizations that are decentralized as they collaborate digitally. And that is really incredible because it's a big, big change from whatever was possible before. And we're only starting to see the very beginnings of what that makes possible. But it does mean that there's this opportunity right now to harness that arbitrage around the world of cost of living and cost of labor to create new products and services.
My question to you was going to be how will it work in job creation? I mean, do you think all jobs will be transformed?
I do. I think the future is going to be humans working with algorithms. So artificial intelligence is a tool. If you think about, one quote from Henry Ford that I really love is he said, look, if you're going to ask a customer what they want, they're going to say they want a faster horse. But what I'm giving them is this whole new electronic horse that's really different. And over time, cars totally evolve. And, I know Tesla is helmed by a really wonderful South African and is a great, an amazing company. But if you think about Tesla is totally transforming the experience of driving, making it electronic and ushering in a new age of driving that if you ask people, they would not have even thought to want that. And I think with artificial intelligence, you actually have this new tool that humans can use to solve problems. So when you think about medicine, we won't be replacing doctors, but we'll be augmenting doctors. There are lots of places in the world where there's a shortage of excellent doctors, and now we'll be able to give humans better tools to diagnose illness and potentially to treat illness. But there's always going to be that interaction between man and machine.
Do you think, Walter, that exponential technologies as a job creator, do you believe in that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if I build on the previous point, there's two elements to it. Where you have individuals that have a skill. I think we're certainly going to see exponential technologies, artificial intelligence, etc., augment that skill, and probably then divert the human towards a higher value-adding function in terms of the role they perform. So we use doctors as an example. Healthcare professionals, etc., would certainly be augmented and aided by the use of artificial intelligence to achieve better outcomes. But the one challenge that we face specifically in emerging markets, in Africa and in South Africa with high unemployment rates, is that we have individuals that don't have the skills, that don't even have the job. So, there I think the benefit that exponential technologies play is to create platforms that allows for basic employment. And it's employment that provides the predictability from an income perspective, probably allows individuals to participate in the financial systems. It gives them identity, etc. I'll give you a practical example. We spoke about agriculture earlier as being a high employer a century ago. So in the informal economy, as we have in South Africa, we have a lot of individuals that are growing produce, but they grow it at such a small scale that ultimately they've got to sell that produce in informal markets. It's highly inefficient, highly unpredictable. We have leveraged in the past working with larger organizations. We created a marketplace to connect small growers. And when I say small growers, we're talking about individuals that are growing on small pieces of land, specific products, tomatoes, carrots, etc. And we connected them to consumers of these products, which would typically be restaurants. So bypassing the traditional market, going straight to consumers of products. And we set off to create some form of employment and economic predictability, as I mentioned earlier. But what we also realized is that by allowing individuals from the informal sector to trade on these platforms, they also gained a digital identity. So it wasn't just an individual that was growing a produce. This individual now was rated for the produce that they grew. They got paid, electronically. So now they've got a bank account. They're part of the system. And I think that the knock-on effect of that is pretty significant. So I have no doubt that as we move into the future, professional jobs will be augmented by by exponential technologies, and we'll be creating jobs that we haven't even thought of before. I'm bullish in terms of what we're going to achieve. And then from an economic perspective, all these exponential technologies will also allow us to produce products cheaper and cheaper, which means that typically it gives people will end up with a little bit more money, which they can spend on other products, and that in itself creates another form of secondary employment, etc. But what excites me for the markets in which, South African construct or emerging market constructs is the ability to create employment for the unskilled, and to bring them into that economic predictability that we desperately need. I think the thought that we've got to turn to governments or to large private sectors to create employment is probably it's not a bad thing, but I think it's a massive burden. And so perhaps the future of employment is going to be some form of digitally or exponentially enabled self-employment. And I do think that that's possible in our construct.
Nathana, I've got a little bit of time left, and I have to ask you, which exponential do you find most exciting, and do you think will have the most positive impact on entrepreneurship and job creation?
So I think artificial intelligence, and the reason for that is it changes the way we can apply judgment to data. So if you think about anything we create and build, we're constantly interacting with the world and manipulating it. And artificial intelligence just opens up our capacity to do that in an incredible way, because AI never sleeps. And the way that we can then interact with that artificial intelligence is the future, from my perspective.
Well, we started with an exciting conversation around moonshots, entrepreneurship, micro entrepreneurs, and even job creation. I would want to, Walter, get a summary from you and some hope in terms of job creation. I think it's a passion of mine, given the reasons that I did earlier. And so if you could summarize Moonshot, entrepreneurship, and the topic that we unpacked this today, what would you say? What kind of thought would you want to leave us with?
I would certainly leave you with the thought that I'm excited about the impact that we can make on the continent, specifically around job creation. It does require a helix in terms of involvement of policymakers, the citizen, entrepreneurs, and private business. And while I'm positive about it, it's not going to be an easy path, nor will it be determined. But I certainly think it's a possible achievement or outcome that we can work towards.
Nathana, last thoughts from you. I'm excited about all the findings and the discussions that we've had today about moonshot entrepreneurship and artificial intelligence. What kind of thought do you want to leave us with?
There's a great, I forget who said it, but there's a great quote around how the next Einstein is somewhere out there in a village. And what's going to be really incredible is to see the solutions to problems that folks in Africa come up with in the coming years. And I think we're going to see just some really incredible innovation that is very difficult to imagine or understand from where I'm sitting in California, but is going to really have the biggest impact on the world moving forward.
Well, to both of you, thank you for making an impact in the world. And thank you so much for changing lives as we speak. Moonshot entrepreneurship, micro entrepreneurs, and job creation. A great, and a big thanks to Nathana as well as to Walter. My name is Alana. Thanks to you all.